Okay, class, this is lecture number 1 of 26, so we've got a long road ahead of us, but it'll pass quickly, I promise you that. And anyway, we got a lot to talk about today, and what I want you to do, treat this course as if it was a regular face-to-face course. You should have your notebook in front of you, your textbook if you choose to purchase a textbook. Just all the materials that you would had that you were in a regular classroom with, you need to have here. You're going to be quizzed on this. It'll take place in about 4.5 weeks, and you have a second quiz after the 9th week. You have a third quiz, towards the end of the semester, in addition to your final examination here. All right, now I also want to encourage you that if you, in a course such as this, it's very difficult to have a discussion. So if you need to discuss things with me, feel free to get with me on email, and we'll take care of that. Same thing goes for questions. Like I said, in recorded videos such as this, you don't have an opportunity to ask me questions if you should have questions anyway. But you can always have the opportunity to do so by email. And just use Canvas with that, and you can get back with me. All right, so let's get into this lecture. You should watch this lecture directly after the introduction lecture that we had. And I'm going to use my little video camera here to go back and forth to help you with your notes, and then also to address the narrative, which I'm doing right now. All right, now, I'm going to tell you that in this course we talk about a lot of places, a lot of things, a lot of places. And I'm going to encourage you to travel to these places. I know most of you right now are too young. You do not have the financial assets to be able to do this. But I want to whet your appetite a little bit to pursue your travels. And I'll start this anyway with a quotation here from Mark Twain. And let me get my camera adjusted right. This always takes us a little time to do this. But travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. I truly believe that. And we'll continue with Mark Twain here. Travel. Nothing so liberalizes a man and expands the kindly instincts that nature put in him as travel and contact with many kinds of people. And even maybe better than that is one by St. Augustine. We'll talk about St. Augustine later in this course anyway. The world is a book, and those that do not travel read only one page. And I sincerely believe that. All right, so let's get into our lecture today here. And I'll begin with the earliest forms of human life appeared in Africa about 4.5 million years ago. 4,500,000 years ago. That's what archaeologists and historians pretty much agree with. From here we'll find some of the early men, such as early men, or maybe I should say early ladies, as Australopithecus. Australopithecus was discovered in Ethiopia. It dates back to about 3 to 2.3 million years ago. Here we located, or actually Donald Johanson located, an individual by the name of Lucy. I've got a lot of visuals for you here. So first of all, let me show you where Ethiopia is. We'll take a look at Africa here. And you can see where Ethiopia, and I don't like to point here, so I'll use my pencil here to point out where Ethiopia is. And that's where Lucy was discovered by Donald Johanson. And let's see here. I think here is a likeness there, Donald Johanson, showing you the skeletonized remains of Lucy from, over 3 million years ago. They think so anyway. And let me show you what Lucy appears as. And this is a reconstruction of what Lucy looked like. This is found in the Cleveland, Ohio Museum of Natural History. Now, this is a recreation. What you're looking at right there stands about 3 feet. About 3 feet, and of course they put plaster of old fur, on Lucy. If you'd like to see what Lucy actually looked like, here it is. This is actually a recreation. The actual skeletal remains of Lucy are not in that museum on display anyway, but that's what Lucy looks like. It's kind of an interesting place, nice museum to visit if you wish to do so. All right, we will see some other early men, such as Zinjanthropus, dated back to about 1.75 million years ago, and the persons responsible for discovering Zinjanthropus was Marion Lewis Leakey. This was done so in Tanzania, which if we look at Africa here, and let me find it here, Tanzania is this country. It's not listed as this country. This is another map. You'll see this again in your Western Civilization 2 course. And anyway, it's called the German East Africa here, but that's where Tanzania is located. And so if you go to a place which is called the Ottawa Gorge, and here we can read the article here, the old man of Ottawa Gorge, and that is a skull, if you will, at least partially anyway, of this Zinjanthropus. And I hate to keep moving these things back and forth in front of you, but here's a likeness here of Louis Leakey. It was actually his wife, Mary Leakey, that made the discovery of Zinjanthropus. But Louis Leakey, quite a showman, if you will, here, shared in the credit for that. Let's see if I have some other photographs here showing you Louis and Mary Leakey. There they are right there. They later married, by the way. I think that was in 1936. Don't quote me on that date. But anyway, that's some of the early discoveries here of early man, I should say, discoveries of early man. From there, we'll see some development of such individuals as Homo habilis. And this is not Homo habilis, but it would be something similar to Homo habilis. Here, early man. Who knows? This may be your great-great-great-great-grandmother, for example, there. I don't know. So anyway, we had Homo habilis. I want to give you a little biology lesson here. I taught biology for many, many years. And if we look at the word here, this is a scientific name here, Homo habilis. The word homo is a genus name. Habilis is a species name. The way you write this in scientific nomenclature, you always capitalize the first letter in the genus name, and you do not capitalize the first letter here in the species name, both underlined. And all of this has meaning here. If you look at the word homo, homo means same, and we won't get into a real definition of that. Just trust me that it means same. And if we look at the species word here, habilis, habilis means skilled. So if you want to look like homo, same, man, so to speak here, this is a skilled man. Existed about 2.4 to 1.6 billion years ago. And let's see what else we have here. We have some other early man, Homo erectus. Homo erectus, you can read the dates on this. Existed 1.8 million, about 500,000 years ago. Upright man, erect man, if you will. And from there we had Homo neanderthal. Homo neanderthal was discovered in the Neander Valley in Germany, by the way, and you can go there today if you wish to do so. Existed about 130,000 years ago to about 25,000 years ago. Short, if you will, short femurs, short long bones, not able to run very fast, not real smart. First, they believe to be the first to bury their dead. Anyway, Homo neanderthal. All right, and then after this we would have modern man, Homo sapiens, such as Cro-Magnon, a little bit taller than Homo neanderthal. They probably interbred, probably did anyway, a little bit taller, longer bones, able to run faster, smarter, and would, of course, compete and would outcompete, with Neanderthal man. Modern man, as we recognize it today, here, Homo sapiens. Sapiens, I did not translate sapiens for you a few minutes ago. Sapiens means like intelligent or smart, so smart man. Or Homo sapiens sapiens, such as what you and I are anyway, very smart man, smart man. All right, so modern man crossed, so to speak here, modern man crossed from eastern to the western hemisphere about 40,000 to 15,000 years ago, such as that. Now, where I want you folks to go, I want to take you up to the area of Alaska. So go to the area of Alaska. You know where the Bering Strait is, and the Bering Strait, which separates Asia and separates it from North America. All righty, now, during the time we're talking about here, we had an ice age. The ice age occurred from about 35,000 BCE to about 11,000 BCE. All right, so let's take a break here and let me explain to you what BCE means. BCE means before the Common Era. Before the Common Era. That is what we use in Western civilization and in history here. You probably are familiar with BC, before Christ, and we don't use that in this course. We use before the Common Era. So let me give you a little lesson on this, on how we determine this. So pay attention to me. It's not rocket science here. But what I want to do, let's divide the before the Common Era against the Common Era. Common Era is what you probably refer to as AD, Anno Domini, in the year of the Lord. But let's just say that we have year 0, which is here. Alrighty, now folks, I work backwards here, so I'm having to do everything backwards, upside down, so to speak. So be patient with me when I goof all of this up. Don't laugh at me too hard. But let's go over here, and we'll say that this is the before the Common Era side. This is the BCE side. Now, this is 11,000 BCE. Now, when time moves, it moves in this fashion over here. It's going to go from here and move here towards the Common Era. Now, when we get to the Common Era, then time moves in this fashion right here. All right, so currently, when I'm delivering this lecture to you, it is the year 2020. So from point 0 here, we are 2020 years in this direction here. Now, for the before the Common Era, 11,000 BCE. Now watch what I'm going to do here. And in 10,000 BCE, 9,000 BCE, 5,000 BCE, 3,000 BCE, and here we have the year 0. So if I ask you, how many years ago was this period of time? How would you determine that? And if you were in class with me, that's what I would be asking you. Well, what you have to do is take 11,000 years before the Common Era and add to it the 2020 years that is here. So where the Ice Age actually ended was about 13,000 years ago, about 11,000 BCE or 13,000 years ago. You kind of get the idea of what I'm talking about with that. Now, that's not difficult to understand. I want you to just work on that a little bit here and adjust here. My camera's trying to focus on me, and adjust to thinking about this as BCE and CE rather than BC and AD, because that is not the terms that we use in this course. So let's go back to our camera here. And one thing I want to explain to you also, there were numerous cave paintings. And these cave paintings, which came from about 200 caves, these caves were located in primarily Europe. You can find them in France, you can find them in Spain, you can also find them in South America, by the way. And in fact, I've personally seen some of those cave paintings, which I actually show animal scenes, you know, from the times of, say, 33,000 to 12,000 years ago. And these cave paintings will depict such things here as stags and bison and bear and bulls, rhinos. Here, if we look at one that's in your textbook here, let's get this adjusted right there. You can see whatever those animals are. It looks like a horse, and I don't know what the other one is. But numerous cave paintings at present there. If you ever get an opportunity to look at those, they're kind of interesting. Here's another one that I dug from some other source here, The Fate of the Cave Bear, which actually a cave painting dating back probably 30,000 years ago, showing a bear of the time there. And so this gives us a good indication of the animals that were present there during those times. Now, people at this time, so I want you to imagine here that we have individuals, and these individuals are trying to eke out a meager existence here in this time in which we have the closing parts here of the Ice Age. Alrighty, so people, of course, have to eat. Now today, if you want to get something to eat, you stop at a fast food place, or you have your mom to prepare something for you there for the evening meal, and sit down at the table with your family and enjoy that evening meal. But carry yourselves back to about 10,000 years ago, and where did you get your food from at that point here? This meant that you had to hunt for your food. You had to be a food gatherer, a scavenger, a forager. So you had to find your food source. So where your food source went, that is where you likewise, you have to go. You have to follow your food source. You are a nomadic type of individual. Nomadic, I'm talking about you change location. You move around at that time. All right, so let's go back to our camera here and see what we're going to see. See what we're going to find here. And people would use such things as darts, spears, arrows, stones, just stone clubs, if you will. Fashion traps, and then herd your prey into the trap where it would fall maybe 10 feet and it can't get out, and then you would stone it to death or spear it to death. That's what I'm talking about here, traps and pits. You'd use fish, and you could catch the fish, if you will. Use like fish line. It was made out of fibers, plant fibers, if you will, hooks that were made out of bone. You can imagine what you would use for bait, if you will. Perhaps it would be even better to try to fashion fish traps, if you will. And like I said earlier, we can use some of these spears. And you would appreciate this more if we were in class here. But you can imagine the spear that I have here. You have a fire-hardened tip, such as what you're seeing right there. Maybe put a little barb on it, if you will, there too. But anyway, that was a type of weapon that you could use at that time. All right, so you were a hunter. You were a scavenger. Okay, so imagine this now. Oh, and by the way, some of the food sources that you would pursue would be like reindeer, elk, if you will, reindeer, elk, wild boar, sheep, like Dall sheep, bison, the buffalo, of course, mammoth, mastodon. Let's see if I have a likeness of this. Here we go, showing you some of the animals of that time. The giant beaver happened to be one. The woolly rhinoceros, the giant sloth happened to be another. Anyway, those are the types of animals that you would pursue. Okay, so as I told you earlier, the Ice Age ended about 13,000 years ago. And with this, the warmer temperatures will take place. Glaciers, and we had these glaciers, these huge glaciers that covered North America, South America, much of those areas anyway. And by the way, if you travel to the other part of the world here, my friends, if you go to South America, you'll find a very opposite effect down there. If you go down to Argentina, down to Chile, places such as that, you'll find glaciers that are present there, just like we would find in North America and in northern parts of Africa and northern parts of Europe. All right, so these glaciers began to recede. And when they did so, due to the warmer temperatures, this meant that the cold-loving animals of that time, such as the Dall sheep and a saber-toothed cat and that sort of thing, they would follow the cold source there. So as the glaciers recede, these animals began to move northward, or if you're in the southern hemisphere, they would move southward, if you will. And if you were a person at that time that was a hunter, that was a forager, you had to follow your food source. That meant that you had to move northward, or in the case of South America, you had to move southward. But what if we could come up with something different? What if we had people that chose to not follow their food source and they would stay behind? They would stay behind. And this meant that you had to now produce your food. So you became a food producer. So let's write that into your notebook here, and here we go. So we had these food producers. This is going to take place about 3,000, 4,000 years ago. People stayed behind, and they began to plant crops. They would capture animals. Instead of killing the animals and consuming the animals on the spot, you capture the animals and you take them back with you. And if you have several of the same species that are of different sexes, you allow these animals to reproduce. So this gives you a constant food supply here. Alrighty. And if you take these animals, then you can domesticate the animals. Now, my friends, this is the most important development in human history in many, many years to take place about 3,000, 4,000 years ago. So we see agricultural production, we see the domestication of animals here. This, of course, requires you to stockpile food. You have to develop storage pits. You've got to do this because these foods are perishable, so you have to be able to provide for your winter food supply with that, so you have to be able to store that. It also instills in you, you have to save your seed, because if you eat your seed, then you do not have anything to plant the next year. Now, wouldn't this require you also to be cognizant, to recognize seasons? Don't you have to know when the winter season is going to be, when the summer season, the growing season will be present, when the rainy season will be present there? So what does that require you to develop? And I think you will agree with me, we have to develop a calendar. And I'm telling you, friends, here, that as we go through these various civilizations, I want you to see how the various calendars began to be developed. And at first, they're going to be rather primitive calendars. And then we'll see that they become much more sophisticated to the calendar that we have today. Not that it is completely sophisticated, but it's far better than one that I could develop here. So watch this as that takes place. So people began to settle down. And when they began to settle down, they began to come together. People not living nomadic, not living individually, but people come together. And when they come together, they began to form villages. All right, so anyway, here we have a village that is formed, and it's difficult for me to define what is a village, what is a town, what is a city, what is a metropolis. You can use your own definitions on that, but we're going to say that the villages are the smallest of these communities, and we have towns that will develop that are larger, cities which are even larger than that. So people come together here. It's a big, big development here. All right, so let's see what else we have. One of the towns I wish to mention to you is one of the oldest towns that we know in Western civilization, which is called Jericho. You're probably familiar with it. If you go to church anyway, you're probably familiar with it. Maybe you're familiar with it otherwise if you don't go to church. But it is a settlement that was thought to have originated in about 9,000 BCE. If we look at that 9,000 BCE, that is 11,000 years ago. And if you're traveling in Israel today, Israel's always a fun place to visit. There's a whole lot to tell you about Israel shortly anyway. But if you go there to Israel and you're passing from Jordan down into Jerusalem itself, you'll go by the village of, which is not a village, it's actually a rather large town of Jericho. It is unlikely that you'll stop there. Your tour guide will probably not start there because it is in a Palestinian section, and it may be a little bit dangerous for you to do so. But you'll drive right by it on the interstate as you're traveling from Jordan going into Jerusalem. All right, so anyway, that was one of the oldest settlements that we have here, Jericho. And let's think about this also. We get the domestication of animals. What can we get from animals? Well, you can see it right there in front of you here. We have wool, fur, hides, leather, milk. You're probably more creative than myself anyway. We can get bones. Bones can be used to fashion weapons. You can also make breast armor out of it, if you will. We can get the meat, the flesh from the animal to be consumed. Beast of burden. In other words, we can have like the domestication of cattle. You can use horses, if you will, for plowing. But anyway, and what else do you have to develop in these cities? Well, pottery to store vessels. You will also need to develop tools such as sickles and plows. All right, so you can see how civilization is developing here. But let's take, for example, here that we have a plow, and the plowshare is made of wood. Well, that doesn't work very well. So we might want to use something else for that, like copper, obsidian. Now, the area in which we're going to be talking about the next time that we get together here is in Mesopotamia. It is an area that is very, very scarce in natural resources. So if you're in those areas, that means that, if you're going to get a sharper edge than that of, say, trying to use a stick to scrape the flesh from something here, you might want to consider obsidian. Obsidian, which is volcanic glass. Well, that's not present in much of the areas of Mesopotamia, so that means you have to find it in other areas, such as near the Black Sea. Or if you need copper that can be used for making tips for spears, and it is not found in the area of Mesopotamia, but it is found in Anatolia. That is where Turkey is located today. So if you want those items there, how can you get them? Well, you can see it right in front of you here, folks. You have to trade for that. And that's the way that you do it legitimately. You trade an item that you have a surplus of, such as whatever it may be, animal hides such as that, and you trade it for something that another area has a scarcity of. So we generate trade. So this means that we have villages communicating with villages, trading with those villages, towns with towns, cities with cities here. So that brings about trade. But unfortunately in our society, we have people that don't believe in doing things the right way, and they're dishonest individuals, and they want to steal from other individuals. We need to take those folks out and punish those individuals. So what happens here is we have some people that will go into the villages, and they pillage and they plunder that village, right? And that's what happens. Well, it's just like my house, my friends. If you do it once to me, don't come back. Because if you come back, I'll be ready for you. In fact, I'm ready for you in the first case right there. All right, so that means that people in the villages will begin to develop weapons. All right, so weapons that we see. To protect your village here, we got daggers and battle axes and spears and slings and maces and shields that all will be developed here. All right, so these villages began to wage war upon some of the other villages, and this requires you to protect yourself, so we end up manufacturing shields. Not immediately, it'll take a number of generations for this. We develop shields, helmets, and you'll see some of these as we go through the accompanying lectures here, folks. All right, so towns began to enlarge into cities, and with this we'll find that social groups will emerge out of this. Now, I want you to watch this as we go through these various civilizations. And all of these civilizations that we talk about, you'll see the same basic pattern of hierarchy, of human hierarchy, to emerge out of this. We may give it different names, and we will give it different names, but it will always be that same pattern. At the top, you're going to have your leaders. These are your administrators. These are your kings and your rulers. And you'll always find there's a second level, which are your religious leaders, like your priests. They will have different names, but they will be individuals that are your religious leaders. And where do you good folks fit in? Where do I fit in? We're the common people. We are the workers. We are the peasants here. And that is it here, folks. We have these three levels of development of human hierarchy here. To go through it again, at the top we have administrators, we have priests, and we have others here. All right, so anyway, that'll be it for today's lecture. I've been at it for about 25 minutes here, folks. You also had your introductory lecture. So you have a lot to take care of. You have some videos to look at here, and notes to take care of. And you also have your first quiz to take place, too. I think your first quiz may be after the next lecture, though. All righty? Okay, folks, thank you very much for your attention.